Hi everyone, and welcome to another Uncut Exception mini sessions episode. For tonight's stream, I'll be sharing about image placeholders on the web. We'll take a look at some different ways to do it, from simple ones to like a bit more complicated ones. So let's just get right into it. So here's my screen. So here we have a sample page with an image. So this loads fine. So this is a 1000 by 1000 image. It's a very big image. I think it's 852 kilobytes. So it works well. But the thing is when you serve your like app in production, it gets accessed by different people with like different um, internet speeds or like network conditions than you. And this image could load very slowly. So we can sort of simulate that through DevTools by throttling our network speed. So let's try fast 3G and refresh the page. So now we will see that the image doesn't get displayed right away. It gets like parts of it appears like one at a time from the top to bottom. It gets even worse when the internet speed gets slower. The user will be like the visitor of your site will be left like staring at this blank space until the image loads. So let's remove that. So what are different ways we can like make it look better than not displaying anything? So one quick way is to just apply color to where the image would be when it's completely loaded. So instead of just this blank nothing, we can at least add some color there to know to say that this is the area that the image will cover once it's loaded. So that's very simple to do. We can just add like a background color. You can choose whatever background color you want. You can ignore this. This is for later. You can choose whatever background color you want. Could be like something that's a color within your brand guidelines or whatever. But let's try it again. Now we see, even though the image hasn't loaded yet, um, we at least see an indication that the image will be there. Um, okay, so what's next? Uh, what's next? So here currently we're just using a static um, color as our background. So we can make it slightly better by using the dominant color in our image as the background color instead of just, so imagine you have a gallery of images. Instead of all of them just displaying gray, they could display like different colors based on what's the dominant color for that image, so that we can do that. So the idea is still the same. You're still going to use background color, but we need to determine the appropriate background color to use. And for that, we can use, there are different ways to do this depending on like your stack. But let's say we're using Node.js, we can use libraries like dominant color to extract like the dominant color of an image. So we'll try that here in our terminal. So let's go to Node. So this is an npm library. So we have to install it via npm, but I already did. So let's call it color. 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 And actually just follow the example. So color, pass in your image. The JPEG. So it's using a callback. So okay, fine. Just console.log the result. So yeah. So what I was testing this earlier, it looks like the hex result is not like working well. So let's try RGB by passing the option. And of course, this is not the only library out there. This is just the first one that appeared. Like I went on npm, search for dominant color in image is like the first one on the list. So it be popular. RGB. Okay. And here we got the proper result, which is annoyingly in percentages, but we can work with that. So let's just replace our hex with RGB. So 43%, I don't know what that is. So let's just 0.43, 9. Manually converting, but of course you can, automate this in your code. So let's use this background color. Try it again and refresh, and we'll see we're using a background color that is supposedly the dominant color in this image. So if you have a mostly red image, then you'll be showing a red background color. So at least that looks better while the user is waiting for the image to load. So yes, so far we've only dealt with colors. Another approach for using a placeholder, I mean for like this showing a placeholder is what we call the LQIP, or low quality image placeholder. So this is like a technique wherein when instead of like displaying a color, we display a lower resolution version of the image, like maybe like 32 pixels by 32, and then we scale it up to fill in like the entire image area, so it will look like a bit blurred and like pixelated maybe, but that's all right. It's better than not seeing anything, or better than just seeing the color. It depends on your preference in your app, I think. But let's try to see how we can do that. So there are two ways to do it. One is obviously you have our image at JPEG here. You can just resize it into 32 pixels by 32 pixels. So that needs to be done like maybe automatically when the user uploads an image, resize it to 32, and then store it separately. So that's fine, I guess. Another way is to use base64 data URLs. So let's do the second one because it's more convenient. So there are also, again, different ways to do this. In Node.js, there's a library called LQIP, LQIP, I don't know how to read it, that accepts an image and then returns like a base64 representation of a resized image. So let's try it. Okay, so let's just try it. So let's put that base64, pass in the image URL. It seems to return promise, so let's just overwrite this. And here we got our base64 data URL of our low quality image placeholder. We can just copy that. We can store this in our DB if this is like automated in the backend. But what we can do is once we get that in the front end, we can just set it as the background image of our image element. So it's long, yeah. And let's try it again. Close this, and refresh. Okay, that's some ugly styling there. That's why I added this. So let's refresh. So now we see like a lower resolution version of the image instead of like a plain color or nothing. So it's, to me, it's like better that that we see like this kind of placeholder, like it kind of looks like the final image already. So at least you know what it looks like once the final image loads. So yes, that's the low quality image placeholder. And finally, so one thing that I like, some maybe downsides or like some inconvenient stuff about low quality image placeholders is that first, if you're using the data URL base64 data URL like approach, it can get very long in your HTML. So, and also if you're using like the separate file where you resize it to um, you have a separate file resized to 32 by 32 pixels. You have to store that file separately. Some ways to work around that is if you're using services like Ordinary, where you can automate this resizing of images on the fly, so that could work. So you can maybe say something like, okay, this is just pseudocode. I'm not sure of the exact URL anymore. Extraordinary.com/image.jpg, for example, and then just say width equals 32. So you can do something like that. Then that would also work. But yes, that's low quality image placeholder. This is better than colors. And finally, let's proceed to the last approach, which is using blur hashes. So this blur hash thing is pretty new, I think. So the idea is instead of having a very long base64 representation of the image, or having a duplicate of the image but resized to 32 pixels, we only instead get like a short hash, so which is like a short string, short, definitely shorter than base64 string, and then we send that hash to the front end, and the front end sort of decodes that hash into a 32 by 32 pixel image, and then that's what we display. So let's take a look at how that works. So yeah, in order for blur hashes to work, it really needs like an external JavaScript library to do the decoding of the hash. So for that, we're going to use blur hash. So again, we npm install it, but I already did. So let's just load it. Okay, so what does a blur hash look like? So a blur hash just looks like this. So it's just, sorry, I didn't resize my code editor. So this is like a blur hash, and we just have to decode it and convert it into a 32 by 32 pixel image. So how do we do that? Let's get rid of all of this for now. How we do that? We use the blur hash library. So it's like there's some sort of like boilerplate or like some code that we need to run in order to decode a blur hash. So first, of course, decoding it itself is just calling the decode function from blur hash. So here's our blur hash that we get from the database or from the API, and then the size of the final image that we want, and it will give us like an array buffer of like the pixel data. So you can't display this directly in an image tag. You have to like draw it in a canvas and then read the drawing from the canvas basically. So that's what we're doing here. We create a canvas element. We write the pixels into that canvas, and then we read the canvas. So let's not use to blob. Let's say we want to use URL. So let's see if this works. Yes, so we can use data URL. Okay, that's nice. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll set this data URL as the background image in our IMG tag. So how do we do that? So the idea final result will still look something like this, but instead of this being hard coded as like the image placeholder, as like the locality image placeholder, we instead dynamically add it from the result of like the blur hash decoded placeholder. So let's just remove that. And in our code, we can just use like placeholder and get the image. You can ignore that part for now. That style, that background, image, that's okay. So let's see if this works. Now we don't need to store the image anymore. Let's see if it works. Why does it not work? Okay. Anyway, so the idea should still be the same. We set it as the background image for our IMG tag. Maybe if we can remove the background color. I wonder if that will work. Okay, nope. Nope, didn't work. But anyway, yes, the idea should be the same. So how do we get like a blur hash? That's how do we convert, how do you get a blur hash for an image? So when a user, so these blur hashes, they need to be calculated the moment like the image is like uploaded or stored in our storage wherever that is, so that we can store the blur hash in our database and then include it in our like API response, for example, or use it when we render our page. So we can, so given an image, we can again use the blur hash library here. It has an encode function that converts like image data into a blur hash. Yes, and that is what this function is for. So what we're doing here, this is, I don't need to understand this. This is specific to like Node. If you're using Node, there are other ways to do this in other like backends, but we are going to use Sharp, an image processing library for Node to get the image data. So just copy this and paste this here. And what we can do is we call, so inside our function here, we are calling blur hash encode image to blur hash, and then the path to our image. And it will give us like the blur hash for that image. We store that to our database. And then later when our page is loaded, we pass this blur hash. Yes, we pass this blur hash into our decode function. So we get our nice placeholder. So to see this, because some results not working on local stuff, I wonder why. Maybe it's because I'm using it directly on the same image, but it can look something like this. So you notice, so this is a page that I created, but I'm using blur hash as a placeholder for the background image. You will see that, yeah, maybe we can block this. Okay, why is it not loading? There. So we can disable cache, and then this is the photo. Yes, let's just block this. Block request URL. Okay, let's try. So here is what like the blur hash looks like if you um, take a look at the background. Maybe how do I hide everything? Add a new rule. Add everything. Display. why it's still there. But anyway, so here, if you just look at the background, this is a blur hash. So it's looks like smoother than like the low quality image placeholder, even though it's scaled up into like an entire page background. But the thing is, we didn't actually need to render like this entire um, data URL from our backend. All we needed was um, the blur hash library to decode our blur hash, as well as the blur hash string itself, which is just, I don't know, maybe 20 characters. So if you think about it in like a site that displays a lot of images, I think the gains that you get there adds up. Instead of getting like a very long data URL for each image, you only get like a more or less 20 character blur hash, and then one blur hash library, which is like 1 kilobyte in size. And I think that's makes you load fewer data into the user's browser. So that's nice. And yes, and then what I did here is, how do I unblock this? So what I did here is, initially when the page loads, I display like the blur hash, and then load the actual full image in the background. And then once the full image is fully loaded, I just like transition. Okay, so it's still loaded, and then I just do a like fade animation to reveal the full image. So that's one use case. Is very heavily used in the Unsplash website, if you're familiar with it. So you see, as you scroll down, the blur hash is displayed right away, so you don't just see a blank like rectangle, and then you see like what the final image would look like before it actually loads. So that's pretty much it. So I guess for now, um, so what have we done? So we took a look at different ways to do to use image placeholders on the web. Started with colors, like just a static color, and then into using the dominant color in our of an image as the background color, and then we looked at low quality image placeholders, or LQIP, um, which uses like a very low resolution version of the same image, which of course loads faster, and then you just display that while the actual image is loading. Then finally, we looked at blur hashes, um, which works pretty similarly to the low quality image placeholder approach, but the information we send is like fewer. So we only send a hash, and then we only load a very tiny blur hash decoding library. So better for me. So that's it for tonight. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments, and see you next time. Bye bye.